Frank, in your book, Finding 12 Minutes, you share this compelling idea that just 12 minutes a day can add up to over 40 hours a year of reclaimed time. And I love this framework. I think engineers in general really like frameworks, and this one to me is an easy one. So what inspired kind of this concept, and why is it especially valuable for civil engineering leaders today?
Yeah. So, the one way to answer that is, and this is something that I recognized early on, is, what do most AE firm leaders kind of look at every single day? It's utilization. Where's the utilization report? And what you find is that we end up sitting in the meetings on Monday morning, going over the utilization report and sitting there going, why is Anthony's utilization 64%? Okay, what are we going to do to fix Anthony's utilization? We're going to do these things. Come Monday, we sit down, we look at that report again, and what's Anthony's utilization? 64%. So it's one of those things to where...
What if just 12 minutes a day could unlock over 40 hours of productivity each year? In an industry built on precision, but often constrained by time, that idea isn't just interesting, it's transformative. In today's episode, we're excited to have Frank Lazaro, advisory practice lead at KP Reddy Co. and author of the book, Finding 12 Minutes. Frank previously joined us on the AEC Engineering and Technology podcast, where he shared insights on using AI to gain a competitive edge in both marketing and sales. But today he's back to dive even deeper into how AEC leaders can rethink their approach to productivity and innovation. With a background in marketing, technology, and strategic growth, including leadership roles at global firms like Deloitte and AT&T, Frank brings a unique cross-industry perspective to innovation in the AEC space. Frank's going to talk about how civil engineering leaders can adopt the 12-minute mindset to move from reactive to intentional workflows, overcome common mindset barriers, use AI tools more strategically, and create future-ready organizations one small shift at a time. Whether you're leading projects, managing teams, or growing a firm, this conversation will show you how consistent, focused actions can lead to meaningful transformation. I'm your host, Anthony Fasano, and this is the Civil Engineering CEO Show. All right, now I want to welcome my guest on to the show for today. Frank Lazaro is advisory practice lead at KP Reddy Co., and he's author of the book, Finding 12 Minutes. Frank, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Hey, Anthony, thanks for having me. I know that we've been working to try to get on the schedule, so I'm kind of glad we finally made it work.
Yeah, for sure. Excited to talk about the topic that we're going to jump into today. And I guess just to start us off, Frank, tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what inspired the transition from a career kind of in marketing and tech to your current role as, advisory practice lead at KP Reddy Co. and just all the AI stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, and it's a good question. I get that often. So, my background's not traditional AEC space. Started off in technology, working for the phone company, did a pretty good long stint with Deloitte. So, having that management consulting background and technology, I kind of had that foundation for kind of the propensity to want to figure out technology and innovation. When I guess just at the start of COVID, connected with a local AE firm, a CEO here. We got to talking, and I took over, managing their client services, their sales, and eventually really kind of taking ownership of understanding our tools and capabilities, like what software we're using, all this other stuff. What I found is that most AE firms, or at least the AE firm that I'm working for, and then I came to learn with other AE firms, very inefficient in how I do things, very old school spreadsheets, this and that. So knowing that I had a small team, I was like, well, how do I elevate this? How do I take this to the next level in terms of being able to do more with less resources, be more efficient, find those pockets of margin and time. And what I found is over the 3 or 4 years that I was there, I was able, there's got to be other firms that would benefit from this. There's got to be other firms that would want it. And so I kind of created a deck and started submitting it to the typical, associations about becoming a speaker, and got on a speaking circuit type of deal, and, spoke a dozen or so times the first year I did it. Next year I did it was close to 30 to 40 times. And, last year probably spoke about 50 times. So from there, what ends up happening is that once they start seeing you talk and you speak and you write a book, everyone was like, are you a consultant? Can we hire you? And so I decided to go off on my own and just kind of build it from there. So the journey's been interesting, really strong background on technology, and then kind of really pulled forward into the AEC industry, the built world, mainly because of just necessity. And then realizing that others would benefit from it, and then turned it into a consulting practice. And then more recently partnered with KP Reddy, and really kind of focusing on kind of building a world-class advisory business for our industry.
That's great. Yeah, I know KP's great. He's been on the show as well in the past.
Yeah.
So, Frank, in your book, Finding 12 Minutes, you share this compelling idea that just 12 minutes a day can add up to over 40 hours a year of
Yep.
reclaimed time. And I love this framework. I think engineers in general really like frameworks, and this one to me is an easy one. So, what inspired kind of this concept, and why is it especially valuable for civil engineering leaders
Yeah.
today?
Yeah. So, the one way to answer that is and this is something that I recognized early on is, what do most AE firm leaders kind of look at every single day? It's utilization. Where's the utilization report? And what you find is that we end up sitting in the meetings on Monday morning, going over the utilization report and sitting there going, why is Anthony's utilization 64%? Okay, what are we going to do to fix Anthony's utilization? We're going to do these things. Come Monday, we sit down, we look at that report again, and what's Anthony's utilization? 64%. So it's one of those things to where it's top of mind with most leaders. That's because it's heads and hours and how much billable time can we get in all of this. And what really struck me is that I picked 12 minutes mainly because the math is simple. The reality is 12 is kind of the baseline. But if you just said, listen, if I can solve AI just finding 12 minutes per day, in one hour, or basically in a 1 week's time, I can make 1 hour of time per employee. And so when you start thinking about just a simple calculation around that, it's like, well, if you had a 200 person firm, if everyone in the firm saved 12 minutes, you could essentially generate almost 10,400 hours of time that you didn't have before from a billable perspective. That's the equivalent of 5 full-time employees, right? So full-time employees, what, 2,080 hours per year. So you realize that it's like, okay, so now you have the found time. How much of that can you actually convert into billable work? So say you capture only 10% of that, but what can most firms do with an additional 1,000 hours per year in billable time? So when you start looking at it from that perspective, if you can start small, you can actually find some big savings. And what you find at the end of the day, it's not 12 minutes. It's really saving an hour per day. So when you think about that across your firm, if you could save 5 hours per week of just efficiencies with your employees, how much of that can actually be converted to billable? So there is a huge and real ROI. And hence why, I kind of focus on the 12 minutes, because I want people to focus on the small things. And what you're going to find is that there's huge gains, big benefits, not only to your bottom line, but just from a work-life balance perspective, a productivity perspective, even client satisfaction perspective.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And I think that, what I love about it is, generally speaking, there's a lot of things you could do for 12 minutes a day that would help you in life, right? If you
Yeah.
jogged 12 minutes a day, if you read books 12 minutes a day. But what's even better about, your approach with AI is that, like you said, it's high leverage. So it compounds. So now if you have your whole company getting a little bit more AI savvy in 12 minutes a day, we know that AI tools can generate a lot of leverage in your organization, right? So
Right.
now you're talking about really a lot of momentum kind of compounding over time. And what I really like about Frank's approach, being someone who worked as a civil engineer and had to be utilized like 90 something percent of the time, is that is exactly what you're going to be up against when you think about how are we going to integrate AI, right? How are you going to do it? How are you going to not drop your utilization? So this idea of small increments is powerful. And honestly, we have the same conversations with AE companies when we do like a project management training program. The question always becomes, well, how long is the training program? Because then they're not going to be doing their work when they're doing the training.
Right.
And my take on it is, listen, do you want them to manage projects better? Because if you do, that's your service, right? So it's like if you're a coffee shop and you give them crappy coffee, they're not going to come back, right? So again, it's thinking about where to invest your time. And I guess another question that I would have along the same lines is, a lot of these civil engineering firms, they're operating in this very fast-paced, deadline-driven environment. How can this 12-minute principle really help their leaders and the CEOs shift from kind of a reactive workflow to a much more intentional workflow?
Yeah. So it's interesting. One of the things I love using this analogy, right? So you start thinking about dirty clothes, dirty laundry, right? all of us have dirty clothes. All of us have to do laundry. And when do we do? When we kind of keep pushing those things off to the end of the week or Sunday. And then we realize, oh, okay, I need socks. I got to wash my clothes type of deal. Well, the dirty laundry in our space is all the administrative time that we force these people to do. Fill out timesheets, sit in meetings, help fill out a technical approach for a proposal. So we ask them to do all of this dirty laundry, this administrative stuff, but then turn around and sit there and say, well, why aren't you 70, 80, 100% billable? Right. So what we're doing is that, and if you, God forbid, you're a people manager, then you have one-on-ones and you got year-end reviews and you have all these different things that we stack on people, but then we sit there and say, well, you need to be more utilized. Well, at some point, there's got to be a give or take. So from a leadership perspective, you can continue to ask your folks for those things, the things that help kind of shape the softer side of our business that's not billable directly, and utilize AI to help streamline that. So one of the examples I love to use is that if you used an AI note taker to help take your notes and write an email summary and get action steps, and it saves you 5 minutes per meeting. If you're in 3 meetings per day, you're already at 15 minutes in savings. So what it is like you start thinking about, I told this to a people manager recently. I'm like, you should record every single one-on-one interactions you have with your staff so that when you get to the end of the year, AI can help you write a summary of that person's performance. How much time would that save you? Nobody wants to open up their laptop at 9:00 at night. Nobody wants to open up and then they start getting dissatisfied because all they're doing is working me and giving me more work. AI can help not only with employee satisfaction, and you and I both know that retention and workforce in our industry is a big issue, right?
Yep.
So how do we retain our people, and how do we make sure that when we do hire somebody that we can actually make them happy and keep them working for us? So, right? Because it's a heck of a problem to have when you have to go out and replace somebody because the talent pool is very thin. And it's hard to kind of recruit. So these are tools that you can use for also from a retention standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And I give one example for those of you listening. A lot of times what happens with an engineer in their career is they get to a point where they have to start doing business development and they have to start doing proposals. That's not billable time, right? So there are some of these AI tech tools out there that can help you write proposals better and faster and quicker, right? So these are the kind of things in these 12 minutes, right, that you could start to integrate into your routine so that you're doing the unbillable tasks faster now. And you could still, right, and you could still be utilized pretty high, but you still can do the things like Frank is suggesting that you're expecting them to do, but they're just not billable.
No. And so that's the thing. So I think our average utilization in our industry is somewhere between 60 and 64%, right? If that's the average, yes, some people are going to be higher, some people are going to be lower. That means that there's anywhere from 36 to 40% of someone's time on average is spent on non-billable work. How do you reduce that? How can you get that down to 80, make it 80% utilized as the average versus 60% is utilized? One of the things that I also love to think about when you're really kind of incorporating this, it doesn't, like, I think there's this notion that AI and these tools have to immediately gravitate towards client deliverables, when there's a ton of low hanging fruit on the administrative side that just simplify your day, right? Write emails, do these things. Like, I was working with an attorney or an accountant, director of finance, and he was just like, AI helps me write the best demand letters. They're friendly, they're approachable. I get better responses when I get AI to write these letters versus going after a client saying, hey, you haven't paid, right? Because we all have invoices that are 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, right? But no one wants to send those emails. Well, let AI kind of help you craft those things, right? Say it in your own words and then have AI. Those things kind of just speed up your day, free up your time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And going back to that example with the 64%, a lot of times the people who have less billable time are the more executives, of course, right? And they charge a lot more. So if you can capture back 5% of an executive's time and you're billing that, that's a huge, huge revenue boost for your organization.
Yeah, I had a CEO at a conference come up to me after I did my 12 minutes presentation. It was a breakout session. And he came up to me and he's like, I took your formula, put it in my head. He says, average billable rates right around 275 per hour. He says, if I invest $200,000 in this AI technology, he says I can generate $2.5 million in additional revenue.
Wow.
There's not a CEO out there that wouldn't make an investment of 200,000 if they knew they could make 2.5 million, right? So when you start thinking about it, yes, he was a much larger firm. There was some, he was going to get some synergies on that, but that's the math behind it. The math is like you're avoiding this because you're so worried about technical or client deliverables, when reality is that if you focus on the softer side of your business that's not billable, there are still revenue gains because that frees them up to do those things that you think AI is going to take over. So I'm always focused on do those simple things, build the innovation culture within your organization. And what you're going to find is that if everyone's doing it, you're going to start seeing there is an ROI, significant ROI in this if you execute it correctly.
So, Frank, you mentioned that mindset is often a greater barrier to innovation than technology itself in
Yep.
our industry. What are some common like mental roadblocks that you see holding civil engineering firms back, and how can they start to overcome those?
Yeah, there's a couple. I mean, there's probably two or three things that get brought up every single time. It's like data security. We don't know if it's secure, so we don't want to use it. The more technical somebody is, the more engineering, quote unquote, they are, the less likely they believe that it's accurate. And like, oh, it's not accurate, so I don't want to use it. And then the other, and this is kind of more of a silly thing, but it's almost kind of like my process is working, we're making money, why should I change? Right? So it's almost kind of like they haven't seen the light, so to speak. So it's around security, it's around accuracy, and it's like, why are you screwing with my process? It works. Like, why would I change it? So that's the three pillars that I see for the most part where people are very reluctant. Where I see success though is that, and there's really two indicators to success when it comes to this AI or innovation as a whole. If the leader or leaders buy into it, right? Right off the bat, that they're more likely to be successful than other firms. And then the second one is that the propensity of the organization to adopt technology. So if you have a firm that is likely to kind of try new things, you're the first one on BIM, you adopt technologies, you're screwing around plugins, you're doing all these things with like Revit. If you have that culture or that mindset today, plus a leader that's open to this, those are the firms that I'm seeing right now that are being very successful with integrating AI into their workflows.
That's great. And I would say too, for that, the one you mentioned where it's like, hey, all my stuff works now. Why would I change? We're doing well. I mean, the whole idea of innovation is that you're trying to get ahead of the curve. So,
Yep.
you got to look into the future and say, my stuff is working now, but what if it doesn't work in 6 months? Or what if my competitor is doing something better now that's going to lap me in a couple months type of thing?
Right.
So,
Oh, exactly. So one example I like to use this. So if you had firm A and they're charging $200 an hour for something, right? And they're making 10% margin. If you integrated AI into your workflows and you can charge $200 for that same work, but you can increase the margin by 2%, 5%. Who's actually winning in that scenario, right? So you're still billing at the same rate, but the difference is you're making between 10% versus 15%, right? So when I see this and I encourage people is like, you want to kind of find those small things where you have incremental improvements, because the way I look at it is that if you can increase, say, utilization by 2 or 3 points, but then you can also increase your margin or your profit on every project, it's more of an additive thing versus sitting there saying, oh, we had one big home run. No, you and I both know this, right? Single scores runs. Like, I'd rather have 4 singles, right? Versus, a bunch of strikeouts. But that's the reality of it is that you have to think about this in small things, simple things like note taking. One of the things that I told somebody recently, I'm like, if you use this and your client was open to it, but used an AI note taker when you're talking about change orders and you can document these things so you don't have to rework something over and over again, how much time does that save you, right? Just being able to go back to the notes, see it, update the statement of work, so you start thinking these very, very small things. But none of this is actually, it's like, this is not a client deliverable. I'm not having it to review plans or do something. I'm having it do all the dirty laundry, that administrative stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good way to think about it. So, Frank, for leaders who are ready to kind of act now, what's the first step they can take to apply the finding 12 minutes approach and begin creating some more innovative, future ready organizations?
Yeah. So right off the bat, I like to, so there's two indicators, we didn't touch on this earlier. There's really two indicators I think that kind of show that the firm's likely to fail. If they start with the tool and not the problem, that's a big issue, right? Don't come to me and say, "Hey, I want to use ChatGPT," because my first question back to you is, to what end? What are you trying to solve? So the other thing too is, don't think that it has to be client deliverable related. Focus on those small things. So if you can start small, simple use cases, everyone in the firm is going to start using the AI note taker. We're going to use it, or if you don't want to use it for clients, just use it internally. Right. So for internal discussions, proposal kickoffs, internal discussions around projects, do it there first. So my suggestion is, start small, start with what problem you're really trying to solve for, and then kind of go from there. And there's other easier ways to integrate this too. You start thinking about, a firm's social media, you start thinking about writing job descriptions, there's so many other areas that could benefit the firm initially, just so that you can kind of get people acclimated to understanding how the technology works, which then is, once you start showing them use cases and wins, they're likely to try it themselves. But if you go in and say, "Hey, listen, Anthony, I'm changing your whole work, the way you work," you're going to push back. But if I say, "Hey, Anthony, all I want you to do is just integrate an AI note taker into your meetings," what you're going to find is, "Oh, that's pretty useful." And then they're likely to accept bigger things that come later.
Awesome. So, one last question for you, Frank. If there's one mindset shift or kind of daily habit that you hope every civil engineering leader takes away from this conversation,
Yeah.
what would it be, and why does it really matter now more than ever in the industry we're in today?
I think it's because our industry is changing, right? And I'm not saying this is going to change in the next 5 years or 10 years, but the one thing that we have to keep in mind is that the next architecture firm in the next decade or so is not going to be architects. It's going to be a tech firm that does architecture, right? The next structural engineering firm is not going to be a bunch of structural engineers. It's going to be a tech firm that happens to do structural engineering. So what you're finding is that there's that all of these PE investors, equity people, these investors in technology have finally woken up to our industry and are starting to pay attention to it. That's why you're seeing Microsoft and WSP partner together. That's why you're starting to see all these people start focusing on technology, because they know the value, that they're finally recognizing the value that we can drive and how much profitability and margin and projects and everything in our industry. So I have a feeling that there's going to be this first wave of AI, is kind of like the small wave before the big, tsunami that comes in. So I think over the next decade, you're going to see more and more technology come really flowing into our industry. And if you're prepared for it now, when that technology comes, you're going to be able to make the pivot. If you want to put your head in the sand and don't think that we're going to be able to do it, the 30-year-old kid sitting in the cubicle in your office right now that hates the fact that you run your business by a spreadsheet is going to quit and start his own business. So that's what we have to be worried about, is that I think there's this big fundamental shift that technology is really going to play a bigger part in what we do. And we're not going to be so isolated come, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now.
Yeah, that's a great point. And about 5 years ago, I was at a conference down in Atlanta, and one of the Georgia Tech, I think it was like the dean of engineering at Georgia Tech, spoke, and he or she was saying that they had the CEO of Home Depot come in and give a talk to the students, and they said, "You know who our biggest competitor is?" And people were saying Lowe's, and he's like, "No, Amazon."
Yeah.
It's like,
It's a tech company.
right, exactly.
It's the tech company. So, everyone's worried about all these other things like robotics, and it's going to take this. Yeah, that stuff's going to make it in there. But really, it's like your biggest competition is not who you think it is. It really is that 20-something, 30-something-year-old kid that's sitting at his desk that's just like, the way we run this business is crazy.
Yeah.
Right. There has to be better, faster, easier ways to do these things. And they're going to go start their own company or go work for somebody that's already kind of doing that. So my challenge to most AE firms is that don't ignore the technology, get on the wave, kind of figure out how it integrates into your business, because I think I think there's just another wave coming, and I think that there's going to be more surprises and more things that really impact our industry in good ways, right? I know that some people may think it's bad, but I think it's going to impact our industry in really good ways that it's really going to make us tech forward.
All right. Well, he is Frank Lazaro, advisory practice lead at KP Reddy Co., author of the book Finding 12 Minutes, which you can find on Amazon. You can also connect with Frank on LinkedIn. He's got some great stuff. He'll also be speaking in our AEC PM Connect event in Kansas City, which we're excited about. Frank, thanks so much for spending some time with us here on the Civil Engineering CEO.
Yeah, absolutely. And Anthony, thanks for having me on, and looking forward to future conversations.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Frank. What I love about it is the simple concept of 12 minutes a day. Taking 12 minutes a day and investing in an AI is going to compound over time for you and your organization in a very big way. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to our channel here. We're putting out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.